Good afternoon. My name's Rebeccatinder, and I'm an attorney from West Virginia. I'm the West Virginia State We the People Coordinator.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Suskey. I'm Director of Programs at the Ohio Center for Law-Related Education. We're the group that runs the We the People program over in the Buckeye State.
Hello, I'm Lindsey Draper. I retired from the juvenile court bench in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin. Now I'm frankly acting as a member of the National Task Force on Lawyer Wellbeing.
Well, we're so glad you're here. Would you please introduce yourself, students?
Hello, I'm Brady. I'm in 8th grade and I go to Stanley British Primary School.
Hi, I'm Ashlyne and I'm also in 8th grade.
Hello, I'm Ben and I'm also in 8th grade.
And will you introduce your teacher?
Yes, these are Mike Weslenke and Susan Cleveland.
Great. I think we're ready to begin for Unit 5, right? In 2020, we celebrate the 19th Amendment giving women the right to vote, which until this amendment passed, women were voiceless and powerless to decide who would represent them in government. What impact has the 19th Amendment had on women achieving equality with men in the United States and around the world? What are the advantages and disadvantages of universal suffrage? What are the advantages and disadvantages of passing an Equal Rights Amendment? What policies, if any, can the government do to ensure that women have a voice in elections? You may begin.
It was 1873, in a country promising in its constitution that the government would protect all citizens' natural rights, and yet half the nation was deprived of the right to vote. This was the year when Susan B. Anthony exercised her First Amendment right and said, "It was we the people, not we, the white male citizens, nor yet we, the male citizens, but we, the whole people, who formed the Union, and we formed it, not to give the blessings of liberty, but to secure them, not to half of ourselves and the half of our posterity, but the whole people, women as well as men."
Her words express that women not only deserve the right to vote, but such rights are protected by the Constitution. Before the 19th Amendment, state laws prohibited women from owning and inheriting property, signing contracts, serving on juries, and voting in elections. Once passed, all women gained these rights. Since, women have proved capable of making changes in government through movements worldwide. Women have gained traction and increased as well, with only Vatican City prohibiting the female vote.
Universal suffrage is a vital, fundamental right that not only projects citizens' opinions, but it helps sustain a self-governed country. After the Revolutionary War, only white, land-owning men could vote. Thus, the nation was represented by a portion of the citizens rather than the whole people. Representation of all people is a clear advantage of universal suffrage, along with the choice as a citizen to participate or not. Some people believe there are drawbacks to universal suffrage, such as the potential for disengaged voters. This is far outweighed by the importance of all citizens having representation.
The Equal Rights Amendment, or ERA, is a controversial amendment that was passed by Congress in 1972. As such, it failed to receive ratification by 3/4 of states by the 7-year deadline. Important aspects of the ERA are that it would guarantee equal pay, fair employment systems for women. In addition, any law that was in contravention to the ERA would be reviewed by the U.S. Supreme Court under the strict scrutiny standard. Therefore, applying such a standard would heighten the likelihood that the legislation would be struck down as unconstitutional.
However, many characteristics of the ERA are already implemented in other laws and acts. For instance, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 already outlaws gender discrimination for employment. Furthermore, the Supreme Court protects gender discrimination under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, since the Supreme Court case Reed v. Reed. Even with all the referenced safeguards previously stated, enforcement remains an issue. For example, while there is an Equal Pay Act of 1963, the difference in pay between men and women remains significant.
In addition, while the original draft of the ERA would protect all individual rights, the amendment is not without flaws. Therefore, we believe the ERA should be redrafted to clarify what it does and does not protect, as well as provide a more concrete delineation of how to enforce this amendment. Originally, it states Congress has the power to enforce it through appropriate legislation. As a result, the legislative branch would be given more power to enforce as they see necessary.
Women have been running for presidency since 1884, well before gaining the right to vote. While there has not been a woman president, we do believe that women should not be given special accommodations by the government, such as quota systems to promote them into politics. It is the citizens' power to vote for a candidate, not for the government to assert itself into the electoral process. However, much can be done.
First, providing all U.S. citizens a well-rounded education, including government-mandated civics content, beginning with public preschool, teaching all individuals their rights and how to be involved, provides more access to minorities and women, creating a foundation for equal opportunity.
Secondly, outdated laws must be eradicated. The wording of the Constitution itself speaks of men, not the whole people. In addition, as illuminated in the Kavanaugh trial, there are laws on the books limiting women's choice that men are not faced with, further hindering progress.
Susan B. Anthony defends her previous statement by an excerpt from General Butler and said, "The true rule of interpretation under a national constitution, especially since its amendments, is that anything for human rights is constitutional, everything against human rights unconstitutional."
As the ratification of the 19th Amendment.
So much. I'm sorry, we're going to have to stop there and maybe we'll get to your points in the questions. I heard you say in your comments, in your presentation this afternoon, that the Constitution needs to be updated. In what ways, how would you update the Constitution to address equality issues among men and women? For example, what wording would you use?
In my perspective, I think I would use "we the people" like it first stated, because saying men is very subjective to, men. And I think that really says that men have the power and that women do not. So I think just saying "we the people" or "they" or "them."
Adding on to my panel mate, we believe that a redrafted ERA would be vital in amending our Constitution. And in the wording of the ERA, we believe that wording such as "all people" and not "he" and "him" should be used, because in the Constitution previously, many male pronouns are used instead of female.
So I want to pick back up with the ERA, because I think this is something really interesting that we haven't had a chance to explore yet. Talking about one thing that you see being that the ERA says any laws that contradict this will be evaluated under strict scrutiny. Why is that so revolutionary? Why does that matter?
I think, like we stated in our opening, it would really ensure that discriminating against women becomes very, very difficult, because it would be under the strict scrutiny standard. And I think that would definitely help limit gender discrimination.
From the Civil Rights Act of 1964, we believe that since racial discrimination is under the strict scrutiny standard, it would be important for gender discrimination to also be under the strict scrutiny standard. For example, in Colorado, our Equal Rights Amendment is interpreted for women to have protection under the strict scrutiny standard, evaluated by the court under the strict scrutiny standard. So this would be important for the federal government to also implement this into all the states and not just Colorado.
But
In your
you mentioned, oh, sorry, Lindsey, please.
In your statement, you seem to rely on a belief that the Supreme Court would protect the rights of women. Isn't that really a function of who is on the Supreme Court? And it doesn't necessarily follow that the justices are going to believe women have the rights unless the Constitution dictates that they do that. Aren't you relying a little bit on the personalities of the justices?
I believe this does have an impact on it, but I believe within the Constitution, within the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause, women are protected against unfair gender discrimination. But I do believe that, yes, it does depend on who the justices are.
While the Supreme Court is very important in interpreting our Constitution and what it means, for example, the First Amendment has come a long way through Supreme Court cases, and racial just segregation. So many things have been amended through judicial review. However, we believe that it would be important for an ERA to be passed because it would designate that that women and men are protected under the Constitution, and that it cannot be undone by the Supreme Court.
Thank you.
Let's go back to this though, right? Because I mean, you said in your opening statement that gender discrimination is something the court polices. You said it for me, Reed v. Reed. So why is the ERA a departure from or different from the case Reed v. Reed?
I think that the ERA is important aside from Reed v. Reed because it will add legislation different from the 14th Amendment that will further guarantee equality for women that they can't achieve from the 14th Amendment.
What do women not get from the 14th Amendment that they will get from the ERA?
For example, the strict scrutiny review standard from the federal government.
Could not that be legislated in some other way other than an ERA?
It might be, but I think an ERA is a great option.
If we just start over and with the ERA, don't we just basically lose a whole bunch of time for something that's needed now?
Yes, I believe that, however, a new ERA would be important to be redrafted because the original ERA is very vague and it does not specifically list what it protects. And I believe that if a new ERA was to be drafted, it should be more specific of what it does protect. May I please finish?
Finish real quickly.
I believe that it would be important to say what it does protect because it would save time with having to go through judicial review and have to interpret what the amendment does protect. So I think that if the
Okay, good. I got the idea. Thank you. Very good.
Great job. Wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed your initial comments. Although I'm sure we didn't get to hear all of them because we ran out of time. But the portions that we did hear, I believe, answered the questions that were asked, and I was checking them off as you went. So I think we got to hear enough of that to know that we got the whole question answered, and so that's excellent. I like the examples that you gave. The Civil Rights Act, the 14th Amendment, the Reed v. Reed. I think those were all significant and appropriately applied when you were responding to the questions. Also, the reference to Vatican City, not giving women the right to vote. I think you displayed a real understanding of the issue that's involved in this question. The Constitution, as it was originally drafted, covered at that time men, but has been reinterpreted to include all people, we the people, as you said. And I think you have been able to express the transition from the original drafters to how it's interpreted today, and what gaps may or may not exist and how we might consider fixing them. And I think you displayed a good knowledge of this subject, and I thank you and congratulate you for your hard work in this very unusual circumstance that you will remember for the rest of your lives.
I would absolutely echo my colleagues' comments. I think you did a really nice job, not just overall, right, but especially under such trying circumstances, right? We recognize that you haven't been, in-person classes for months now, right? And, you really have done a fantastic job preparing for this. And, that's a real commendation to your teachers as well, to keep this going and to keep you part of this, despite all the challenges. A lot of really, really interesting material for us to dive into, right? I mean, anytime you're gonna start with Susan B. Anthony, like, you've got me. I'm ready to dive in. I really appreciated that you began with such a strong statement about women's suffrage and this concept of universal suffrage embedded within the women's suffrage movement. one thing to kind of clarify a little bit, right? Look into this, kind of see, how you can better understand this. You mentioned strict scrutiny in your opening statement, right? And then you talk about Reed v. Reed as, the Supreme Court already deals with gender discrimination in the way that they analyze. The reason why the strict scrutiny item is so critical is that currently, under Reed v. Reed and subsequent case law, gender discrimination at the Supreme Court gets what's called intermediate scrutiny, right? So there's different levels of scrutiny, right? Which I recognize that you must know because, you're understanding that strict scrutiny, the thing we say in the law is often strict in definition, but fatal in fact, right? Laws almost never pass strict scrutiny review. So I wanted to see more of that distinction, that you knew that the reason why the ERA is a departure is that it's changing precedent, right? Because current precedent says that gender discrimination does not get strict scrutiny. Now, the interesting question that comes out of that then, right, is can a constitutional amendment tell the court what standard they're supposed to apply? There's a lot of really interesting separation of powers things that come into this, a lot of really, really good conversations. But the fact that we're diving in like this, right, the fact that we're having such interesting conversations is a real testament to your knowledge at this point, right? It's a real testament to the amount of material that you've been studying and how deeply you're thinking about this. And it really was a joy to be part of this today. And you all should be congratulated for your hard work. Thank you for letting us be here.
And I too want to congratulate you, and I just can't imagine how you all have managed to hold together to pull this off today, that with the circumstances. And so I'm just start off, I don't want to say in awe, but really appreciating what you've done. So we'll start with that. And the other piece briefly that I want to say is one of the things that I noted in what I want to talk to you about was exactly what my colleague said. You tied together the beginning with Susan B. Anthony. You did it all the way through the end. I like the fact that if you develop a theme, finish it. Don't just throw something out and leave me alone. So that was really good. In your statement, you actually touched on several of the things that I thought I was going to end up having to question you about. No, we have not had a woman for president, and no, we don't need the government coming up with special accommodations that would defeat the equal rights. That would be some special things. You did a really good job in touching on something that was going to be one of my questions, except you covered it in your statement. I would very much like to have had the chance to talk to you a bit more about a couple of the pieces, the drawbacks, because frankly, if ever there were a perfectly written amendment, we really wouldn't need the Supreme Court. We wouldn't need the interpretation. So I don't know that if we started over, we'd get it right ever. That we all happen to be people, fallible. And, even if we got those perfect words, we don't all attach the same meanings to those words. So I'm not even sure how I would have framed a question to you to address that point, but that really is something I wanted to talk to you about. The whole notion of a well-rounded citizenry as the people who will vote. I love the fact that you're optimistic enough to think that's going to happen, that people vote based on being informed as opposed to my heart tells me this is right, or the radio station I listen to tells me it's right. I love that about you. You all give me hope that there is optimism still left. So good. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.